Welcome to this explainer. Okay, today we are getting into something absolutely fascinating. We're looking at this amazing intersection of vintage, old-school machinery and cutting-edge modern tech. As we look at this stunning, photorealistic air-cooled engine bay, we're going to explore what happens when an enthusiastic beginner tries to fix a decades-old mechanical marvel using the very latest in artificial intelligence. And, spoiler alert, we'll see why, sometimes, absolutely nothing beats the grease-stand, hard-won wisdom of the old guard.
Okay, let's dive into this. Picture this. You've got a beautifully vintage air-cooled VW. You're out for a drive, and out of nowhere, the engine starts acting up. It's bogging down. So who do you actually turn to? Do you whip out your smartphone and ask a modern AI chatbot? Or do you seek out the old guard, the veteran mechanics who've been wrenching on these exact cars since the 1970s? Well, we're going to break down a real-world scenario that recently played out on the Reddit r/Beetle forum, and it perfectly captures this exact modern dilemma.
Section 1. The Bogging Beetle and AI. So, let's look at the specific problem faced by our novice mechanic. This is a Reddit user who goes by the name Turbo_Trousers. Their classic Beetle was losing power and just bogging down whenever they tried accelerating in higher gears. It actually got progressively worse, to the point where they literally had to keep the car exclusively in first gear just to keep it from stalling out entirely. Being mechanically inexperienced but super eager to learn, they did what a lot of us would do. They asked ChatGPT for a diagnosis. And ChatGPT offered a technically correct but incredibly generic 3-point checklist. It said, 1. Check for old spark plugs. 2. Look for a blocked fuel filter or carburetor. And 3. Check for debris in the fuel tank. Now, while that isn't exactly wrong, it completely lacks the necessary context for a vintage air-cooled engine. Contrast that with what we call VW tribal knowledge. This is that deep, highly specific community wisdom that understands exact part tolerances, knows the quirks of 50-year-old metal, and most importantly, comes with life-saving safety warnings that a chatbot simply cannot generate.
And this brings us to a really fantastic observation from the source material. A veteran Reddit user named AnybodyIWantToBe responded to the original poster, and they hit the nail on the head. They wrote, "There is a lot of tribal knowledge in the VW community, which is a concept ChatGPT doesn't understand yet." Now that little word "yet" at the very end, that's doing a lot of heavy lifting, but it perfectly establishes the immense, irreplaceable value of the old guard. Generic advice just isn't going to get a classic Beetle back on the road safely. You need human experience.
Section 2. Diagnosing the engine.
All right, let's get into the granular procedural breakdown the community provided. As we peer into this photorealistic air-cooled engine bay, remember how the AI simply suggested checking for a blocked fuel filter? Well, a deleted Reddit user chimed in with this massive, potentially life-saving warning. They said, never use a plastic inline filter near the engine. Air-cooled engines run hot and plastic melts. They went on to point out that literally thousands of classic VWs have been lost to engine fires for this exact reason. I mean, wow, this is exactly the kind of crucial nuance the AI missed. To an AI, a fuel filter is just a concept, but to the old guard, a plastic fuel filter in a hot engine bay is a ticking time bomb.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer precision the community insisted on. They didn't just say, hey, go buy new parts. No, they specifically recommended NGK brand spark plugs. They specified fuel filters with quarter-inch ends, and crucially, they noted that those belong tucked away safely under the driver's side rear wheel well, or by the transaxle, not in the engine bay. They also demanded new valve cover gaskets and insisted on German cloth-wrapped braided fuel lines, which need to be replaced every 2 years. This right here is the exactness required to keep vintage machinery alive.
Let's also briefly touch on the meticulous detail of spark plug thread sizes. A user named Poor Life Choices 1994 pointed out that the NGK BR6ES plug has a 3/4-inch reach, while the BR6HS has a 1/2-inch reach. The 1/2-inch is actually what the majority of stock 1600 base cylinder heads use. This just proves that generic, overarching advice simply doesn't cut it when you're browsing a massive catalog from a vintage supplier like JBugs. You have to know the exact physical specs of your specific cylinder head before you even think about ordering.
And then there is the grueling reality of carburetor maintenance. The AI casually said blocked carb, but the community laid out what that actually entails, especially if you're dealing with Weber ITC carburetors. It requires a complete disassembly of the carburetors. You have to meticulously clean every single internal port, and to tune them, you need a highly specialized tool called a snail meter to measure the air each carb is pulling. And because space in there is so incredibly tight, adjustments often require a dental mirror and an offset screwdriver. The community openly admits it's a total pain to do, but man, it is absolutely essential for a smooth ride.
Furthermore, user AnybodyIWantToBe pointed out a critical maintenance task that the AI completely omitted: adjusting the valves. This is a highly physical, intensely hands-on procedure. First off, it must be done when the engine is dead cold. It requires a specific .006 feeler gauge, a 13mm wrench, and a flathead screwdriver. You even need a large crescent wrench just to physically rotate the engine by hand between cylinders to make the adjustments. A novice simply cannot survive these tasks without a definitive step-by-step guide.
Section 3. The Air-Cooled Bible.
So, if an AI chatbot isn't the right guide for this highly specific physical work, what is? Well, the Reddit community was completely uniform in their recommendation, pointing this struggling mechanic to the ultimate DIY manual. 19. That is the staggering number of editions this single manual has gone through since it was first published back in 1969. It's also seen 15 separate printings. I mean, in the world of automotive manuals, those numbers are astronomical. It cements its status as an absolute legendary artifact.
And here it is, affectionately known by the community as the Idiot Book. Its full title is How to Keep Your Volkswagen Alive, a Manual of Step-by-Step Procedures for the Complete Idiot, authored by the late, great John Muir. According to the Motor Bookstore listing, this revered 478-page text focuses on air-cooled types 1, 2, 3, 4, and fuel-injected VWs. It is literally the step-by-step holy grail for the DIY VW owner.
Now, what makes this book so universally beloved isn't just the technical accuracy, it's the remarkably human approach. Instead of stiff, boring technical jargon, Muir's table of contents uses delightfully chaotic, totally accessible language. I mean, chapters are titled things like How Works a Volkswagen, Shingies and Shakes for the front end, Slips and Jerks for the clutch, and Grinds and Growls for the transaxle. He took incredibly complex mechanics and translated them into a language that a completely inexperienced novice could grasp and execute without fear.
Section 4. Keeping your VW alive. As we bring this explainer to a close, let's focus on the final takeaways and why this enduring analog wisdom matters so much today. We live in an age of instant digital answers, right? But some things still require patience, physical effort, and a real connection to the machinery. And this brilliantly illustrates the stark differences between the modern, convenient approach to troubleshooting and the intensely hands-on reality of classic VW maintenance. Think about it. Today, we might use AI chatbots for diagnostics, whereas the VW reality demands Muir's book or deep dive forums like the Samba. For fuel lines, modern drivers just wait for a dashboard light to pop up. But a classic VW owner, they perform a physical, visual inspection of the braided lines every single time they check the oil. And for carburetors, modern mechanics might just replace the whole unit, but the classic reality is complete disassembly and tuning with a snellometer. It's just a completely different mindset.
Which leaves us with this wonderful, kind of poetic realization from our original poster, Turbo_Trousers, after receiving all this tribal knowledge. They wrote, "A smooth sea never made a good sailor." They totally embraced the fact that they had their work cut out for them, but they recognized the immense value in that struggle. So, I'll leave you with this provocative thought. As our world becomes increasingly automated and diagnosed by algorithms, is getting our hands dirty, making mistakes, and relying on the hard-won wisdom of a community actually the best way to truly understand and appreciate the machines in our lives? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and keep wrenching.